Well, welcome to the Prosperous Musician, and I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Jay. She is a vocal coach. Amongst other things, she coaches the contestants on The Voice. I'm really appreciative that you could join us, Jay. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, how did it all start for you, Jay? Did you grow up in a musical family? How did you get into music?
Totally by accident, I think. I didn't grow up in a musical family. I grew up in a very academic family who didn't understand the arts and creativity at all at that point. They've got better at it, I have to say. But yeah, I was the odd one out. So as my career has progressed, I've always totally understood the odd one out and spend most of my life working with those people that also feel like they're the odd one out. So yeah, I went to a normal school. I went to dancing lessons outside of school and got very into that. And because of that, that was my introduction to music, really, dancing to music and loving music. Didn't really know that I could sing until I had to, start doing things in the local Amdram stuff, and then thinking about going to dance college, having to sing to accompany that with, musical theatre and that kind of thing. So I didn't really know I could sing till a little bit later on, and then went to train in musical theatre. Singing took over the dancing a little bit, went and did all of those sort of show type things, West End, and, tried to have a pop music career myself, worked as a session singer, cabarets, function work, recordings, did all of that. And then when I was 32, I had my my only child. And that took me on a unintentionally different path, because I realized that I didn't want to go and put myself in that headspace of performing. So this was, I hadn't planned that. I thought I would perform forever, and I thought that would be part of my life. And then I had a child and wasn't interested in people looking at me, wasn't interested in being that focal point, just wanted to be happy in my world. So that took me by accident into coaching, because I still wanted to be in music and loving music. So that took me into coaching, and everything from then on, I think, has been unplanned and has been a bit of an accident. So a happy accident, really. With my performing career, I was very structured about, I want to achieve this thing and this thing. And then with coaching, I've just swept along. I've been swept along. So everything, like The Voice, happened by accident. I had, going back a little bit further, I started to train in a method called Still voice training, because I'd started to get a bit nervous about auditions and, was having this slight crisis. And a friend of mine said, come to this course for Still voice training. And it was the first time that I realized that you could understand how the voice worked physiologically, and how that all connected with emotions. And, I just sang before that. I didn't know that you could teach people technical aspects. So I got quite geeky about that, and I started a degree, and I, started to educate myself and in Still voice training. And then I was actually doing a session at Air Studios, and the conductor, it was Tony Bennet, actually, Tony Bennet charity single, and I was singing backing for that. And the conductor, who was conducting this whole military, it was for Help for Heroes, so this beautiful military orchestra, and the conductor said, 20 minutes later, we were in the pub after doing the session, and he said, I'm doing something really interesting, and I know that you're qualified in Still voice training. Send me a coaching CV. And at this point, I'd never made a coaching CV. Sent him one. He said, I can't tell you what it is. And that was The Voice. So I then started to work on The Voice, and have been there for 12 years. So that opened out that whole TV thing, which has been an interesting journey, because that was never in my plan to do that. So TV work, I've done several big TV programs, The Voice being the biggest kind of one that's working with artists. And that's a big chunk of my work. But then alongside that, I also do private coaching. So I work with various bands, prepping them for tours and things, sessions. And that naturally put me into management, because I was coaching people and I was thinking, I hand them over to management often, or I hand them over to the record label, and then they kind of gone. My babies have flown. So I was like, well, you know, I can look after them. So it became, and you know, sometimes it was, you know, a younger female that was like, actually, I want to be working with you. So it's like, okay, what is involved in management? So then I started to do a few courses on how to run a record label, and how, you know, what artist management is involved. And so I now manage people, but coach alongside, and they kind of, I wear quite a few hats. And then alongside that as well, I do a membership that's a kind of somewhere in between coaching and having a manager, where I support artists in their artist development and growth and promotion in that. So that was a very long way round. Basically started dancing, started performing, fell into coaching, had a lovely time coaching, and that led me naturally into management.
Yeah, well, that's quite a story. We've glossed over quite a lot of it there, and we're going to get back into some of it. Well, first of all, there's two things that stood out there. You were talking about you were very focused. It sounded like you had a lot of goals when you were performing. So we want to talk about, did you hit all of those goals? And
no,
changed them as you went. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But also I want to know about how you went into musical theatre. So just talk briefly about that, how that kind of prepared you for the next stages, because it sounded like you went from musical theatre and you wanted to go into like a pop career. Do more of that. So what happened at those kind of times?
Yeah, I loved musical theatre, and I loved that dance element of it. But I also, it was at the time, I'm of an age. So it was at the time of Madonna, Janet Jackson, and all of these dance-based, Paula Abdul. They were very dance-based visual spectaculars. And so that had a massive, Rhythm Nation, like, oh my God, that was just iconic. So that had a massive effect on me, and influence to, try and write songs all the time, and, take that musical theatre dance training into something that is a pop thing, which at that time was really normal, to have that kind of synergy of skills. Now it's a little bit less, we do have dancers, that become singers and put on a big spectacle, but then it was really a thing. I did some really good things with the West End, and I did some really big shows and played a few leads and things like that, but I never really achieved what I wanted to achieve with that.
What was that then? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like getting the lead in a West End. That would be kind of like up there for most people getting into musical theatre. So what was the goal?
I think just being. I would have loved to have been in Les Mis, and I wasn't. I auditioned and got close several times, and then never did that. I think being that one person that is, you never get security in musical theatre, and I think that there are a couple of West End performers that do have security to a certain extent. They're going to go from one job to the next job and being one of those people, I think.
So you're talking about like being an Elaine Page kind of character, or obviously the female equivalent would be, I don't know, Michael Ball or Michael Crawford back in the day, that kind of thing. So a name for being a West End star.
Yeah, and having a kind of I suppose, an identity and a bit of fame from that. And I never did that. I was clutching on.
So what's the kind of, you mentioned Les Mis, so is that like in the musical theatre world, is that the kind of pinnacle? Is that what everyone's going for? Or is that a personal kind of high?
I think it's a personal thing, because I think I just loved it as a work of art. I love Chicago as a work of art, and I love Les Mis and Miss Saigon actually as well. They're just, really creatively interesting pieces, I think. So I think maybe more of a personal goal than a normal one. And then from that, I was like, well, if I'm not going to be that name in that, I'm writing all these songs, I'm interested in music in itself, and got these icons, then I'll do that. But they're really massive goals. Like, when I'm coaching people, breaking things down, let's see what our expectations are and what's realistic and what we can achieve, and how we can set a process to get to those goals. And I feel really, in some kind of Pisces dreamer way, I was just like, I want to be Janet Jackson. And I was working hard to get there, but was it realistic? Maybe not.
That's a good point, because I guess you could argue that the shows like that are peddling sort of unrealistic dreams for people, that being on a show like that is going to suddenly catapult you into the stratosphere and you're going to be this famous person or have this massive career, when, as you know, it's a very small percentage that even if you do win The Voice, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go any further than that. So, but having said that, but also if your goal isn't big enough, then the motivation might not be there. The motivation just to do something slightly higher, going to be as excited about going for that. So I think, like you say, it's kind of like having that goal, but also, as you said, as being realistic along the way, but not so realistic that you're kind of clipping your own wings.
Yeah, so really it's a balance. And I think in this day and age, there's more available. So we were very dependent on sending your CD with your lyric sheets into the major labels, hoping that somebody opened that envelope, hoping that somebody stuck it in the CD player, hoping that they listened to it, hoping they were open-minded and considered it. But now the artists I'm working with, there's so much they can do themselves. So those expectations and those goals, now we can much more go, okay, this is where you want to be. Is that possible? How can we make that possible? What steps can we take? Whereas I think back then it was a bit like, you need that one person to believe in you and open the door. And if they don't open the door, then you've got no chance. So I'm not saying today is better, because I think there's pros and cons of both, but there definitely are strategies that you can do in this day and age. So I think my career would have been quite different, I think, if I'd have done it now, because I think there would have been things I could have done myself, and I could have been writing songs and sticking them out on Patreon, or I could have done it in a different way, which we didn't have the tech.
But you were writing songs at the time of doing the West End stuff, and so you were transitioning then. So you thought you'd were going to then transition into being a recording artist or a pop star.
Yeah.
So what happened with that?
Yeah, and you have to be really tough with that, because the gatekeepers. I actually we used to do our package, and then you'd put a self-addressed envelope in the package so that you sent the package back to you, because it was so expensive to have CDs and photos and all of that. And I love packaging and branding anyway, so I'd got these lovely folders that it was all in, and you wanted it to come back. And one day I got one back in the post, and it literally had it had a conversation on a post-it note between two people within the office that they had left on my folder. And it was something really, it was something like, what do you think of this? And one of them had put something like, oh, pretty dull. Basically they were having a conversation about how boring my project was. And I mean, thank God, you know, 23 or something, and I found the humor in it. But it also spurred me on to try even harder, because I just thought, you know, we're such a commodity. We're just such a, you know, they haven't even cared that their conversation about me is on my package come back. Which is crazy. So I did have a manager, and I had some people that believed in me and had, you know, some good sessions put together, but it never amounted to anything. So you know, that didn't happen, and I could still work as a singer, and, you know, still did sessions for other people, and, you know, was still active as a singer. So it wasn't like the be all and end all of everything.
So how's that been a session vocalist then? What kind of projects were you involved with there?
I kind of had a bit like I do now. I kind of had fingers in lots of pies. So, you know, going a lot of, you know, recording the backing, going for choir, fitting in the choir, recording new musicals for people who, you know, are trying to pitch them, doing, you know, the backing for shows where they want all the backing vocals in on a track, you know, singing other people's songs that they've written for their demos, you know, just whatever came along, really, in whatever genre. I didn't really care. I was just like, if you're going to get me in, I'll do it. So I quite like that. I quite like the session work. That's, you know, that was, every day's different, whereas in a show, every day's the same. So I did quite like that variety, and you're working with different people all the time, and yeah, so that's a good aspect of it.
You so when you got the call or the letter, the note about the getting on The Voice, so talk me through that then. How did that sort of start off, and did it sort of, are you doing what you did when you first started there now, or has your role progressed? So yeah, just kind of start at the beginning.
Yeah, so that was quite a transition for me, really. I was already coaching. I think I was already coaching a couple of pop groups and things, so I was already sort of got a couple of names under my belt. But I do remember going in for the interview and feeling like I'd not been qualified as a coach for that long, and just feeling this whole TV world that I knew nothing about was a bit scary. And there were 6 of us vocal coaches in the first series, and because it was a new show, we didn't really, you know, you don't really know how it's going to land, how receptive people are going to be to it. We don't really know. We're kind of working it out as we go along of how it's, you know, now it's like a well-oiled machine. But yeah, it was a strange thing. And I was working with people like Tony Bennet, who was, you know, she'd been a TV vocal coach for years and years and years. And I'd never thought that I would be in a vocal coach team with somebody like Tony Bennet, which, you know, it was crazy. So I probably felt pretty underqualified and a little bit of an imposter at the beginning. But, you know, you're just coaching people. It's just doing your job. You're just doing the same in a different setting. So, I mean, there is a bit of a skill to it, which I've learnt now, which we didn't probably know at the beginning. But there is definitely a skill to button pushing moments, and how you develop. You know, a song is a minute and a half on The Voice, and how you take the vocal journey and get the different colors in and get the different sounds in, so that you know, they're purely listening. They haven't got all their senses going. They're really focused in. And, you know, there are ways of changing gears in the voice and getting a new sound in. And it could be one of those sounds that makes them push their button. So it's taught me a lot about sort of micro detail in listening, and how to make something interesting so that they react to it. And essentially, you know, that's what a good performance is, isn't it? If somebody reacts to it. So you're trying to get these singers to react to the coaches, to react to the singers.
So yeah, I thought about that. I mean, had a guest on before who's a live music producer, and he was saying the same thing about coaching a band in an audition, and how a lot of people approach it as like a set. You know, they just do like a normal gig, whereas, like you say, it's more about condensing everything into little moments
Yeah.
within micro moments within a moment, which is just even half
Yeah.
a song. It's not even the whole song. So how would you do that? Top three tips if you were gonna, if I had an audition for The Voice.
So I think the devil is in the detail, firstly. And I think a lot of singers don't dissect what they're doing to get that detail. A lot of singers just say, I'm going to feel my way and do what comes out emotionally. And that's great. But you then are not carving your journey through it strategically. And that is needed. So I would, first of all, I'd have the lyric sheet and I'd get them to sing it. And I would do hieroglyphics all over the lyric sheet of things that they bring to the table. So things that make them unique, things that are impressive, things they hit a really good sound here, they did a great vibrato here, they did a lovely falsetto flip here, and I would just draw all over it. And then I'd explain to them what I've drawn and I love this and I love this and we need more of this, and this change of gear here could be, it's great, but we could exaggerate it. And so I would map it out and then talk them through it. And most of the times they don't even know they're doing those things. So they don't know they're doing them to then be able to control whether they do them more or less. By bringing awareness to them, I can then say, let's repeat that here, but bigger. Let's do that again. We can balance it and get it so that the changes are in the right place. And then there's an element of when they've practiced that enough, letting that just happen. The voice will just do it. If it's rehearsed enough, then you're onto emotion and storytelling and communication and all those things. But I think if you go for all the storytelling first, you often miss a trick because you don't notice that detail. So that's what I get first, them aware of what they're doing that is unique to them and is great.
When you're on The Voice, are you like assigned a certain amount of contestants and you stick with them as long as they stay in?
We do have a little bit of crossover due to schedule, but yeah, we generally, because I work on The Voice Kids as well, and and actually you asked me how the job has progressed, and that is one reason where it's progressed. I work to the end of The Voice Kids, right to the end of the final, whereas in the Voice Adults, I duck out before the final. Somebody else takes that over. And The Voice Kids is interesting because when they asked me to do that, I honestly thought, and I was very, very wrong, I honestly thought that it was going to just be full of like Saturday school kids that are all going to be singing the same thing, generic sound, and we're not going to get this creativity because they're not old enough and all of that. Oh my God, I was so wrong. So the first day of auditions, I remember them just one after another coming in with their guitars, their pianos. They've got access to any music they want on the internet, and they listen to it. They listen to it all. They'll say, "Oh, I discovered this person the other day called Joni Mitchell. Have you heard of her?" Oh my God. So they're so refreshing because they're not stuck in any kind of baggage, and this happened at that, I just sang it wrong last time. And, they don't have that. They just can't wait to get on the stage and sing and entertain. So they're an absolute joy, creatively, artistically, and just personally. They're just an absolute joy. Yeah, they grow the more, especially if they get through stages, because then they're allowed to sing something different. They'll sing their blind audition song, which will show something about them, and then they'll sing something else in the next stage. And, so they get more confident as they go through as well, because it's validation that, somebody's turned their chair for them. Somebody likes what they're doing, then they get an opportunity to do something again. And, so they generally grow through the process. And it's a lot of psychological. They need to believe in themselves. They need to be strong psychologically. They need to enjoy it. They need to enjoy the process. genuinely, I feel that they do enjoy the process. Our intention is that we coach them, they're really comfortable with it, they have a good time, they use it for their own exposure of their own projects, and they gain from the coaching, the interaction with everybody, and that is our intention with it. And if a show wasn't that, then I wouldn't be up for it.
Would you say more people are coming into it now with a realistic expectation? Because I think, like, at the beginning, The Voice, I suppose everyone was thinking it's going to be like X Factor. You're going to have like this big #1 signal, and everything's going to it's going to be the platform to launch from. Do people, because it's been going a lot longer now, do people go in with it going now, okay, even if I don't win, or even if I do win, it's just going to mean I'll get a few more followers, and maybe I can get I could charge a bit extra for my gigs and stuff? And or do people
I think I think it's exactly that. I think people are, they need to have their ducks in a row. They need to have their social media ready for when it airs, and they exactly that, of opening doors and getting bigger gigs and getting a bigger fee for their gigs and getting bigger stats on social media. I think it's great for that, and I think people are aware of that. And I think that can happen even if they don't get a chair turn as well. Because I think sometimes the people can be like, especially on Twitter, people can be like, if they're really good and they don't get a turn, then they can be supportive. Why didn't they turn? They're ridiculous.
I know you obviously there's only so much you can say about it, because obviously there's controversial elements to these programs, and there's a lot of, and we've spoke to somebody on this channel as well who's been on the American version and had her story as a contestant. So how, I guess that the theory is that people come in and the producers know exactly who they want to win, and then we'll
manipulate
manipulate the visuals and the story to go along with that. So how true is that, and also how much do the producers have involved in like song choice and things like that? And
I never know. I'm not a producer, so I don't know how, if they do want somebody to win. But I can honestly say there's been times where people haven't gone through or haven't gone to the next stage, and it's made no sense to anybody in the building. Personally, but the public are voting, and so I don't think it's scripted, because I think we would have had different choices had it been scripted. There's always a thing about people needing a story, and I've changed my view slightly on this since doing the management stuff, because obviously working with PR for artists, and I'm reading everybody's Spotify bios and what catches, and I think there's this thing about you need a sob story. You need a sob story to be on these TV programs, but actually you don't need a sob story. You just need a story, and anybody needs a story, because anybody needs something human to make them interesting. If you go to a Spotify bio and it says, my music is this, I write cinematic, blah, 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 I hope you like it, I'm not going to click listen, because it's just like, you're not telling me anything about yourself. I want to know something human about you. So that I think there is an element of everybody needs a story to be interesting in any situation. And that story could be, I go rock climbing at the weekend. It doesn't have to be a sad one. And so I sort of feel, instead of sort of defending it for a few years, going, no, you don't need a story, that's not going to help you get on the show. Now I'm a bit like, you need a story to get a record contract. You need a story to get a job in a job interview, because if you don't bring anything to the table, you could do a great job, but if nobody's going to magnetize towards you, then. So I feel a little bit with the story thing that, like, everybody needs a strap line in life. You know, if you were describing somebody at a dinner party, you'd say, you know, the one that does such and such, or, you know, the one, and you describe them in some way. And I think that's what the story is. You know, that's
So do you
slightly
work with them?
controversial.
No, not at all. And I totally agree. And I think a lot of the talent shows do have that kind of feeling that, yeah, it has to be a sad story, and they usually do sort of focus on the ones where the grandmother's died or the best friend killed themselves, and this is something for them. And because, yeah, I gets people in the fields, doesn't it? That's what people
Yeah.
want. Yeah, I totally agree. Even without, you know, being on a talent show, you still need a story. You need an angle. You need something to differentiate you, or to, like you say, your own unique story. Because otherwise, music is very commoditized, isn't it? You could go
Yeah.
somebody else and listen to something probably just as good, or if not better. But you're really listening to this one because you're vibing with the story, or you feel some connection to that person.
Yeah.
That's why you're listening to their music. And yeah, like you say, in a show, and that's what it is, isn't it? It's an entertainment show. Essentially, it's not necessarily about the music. It's more about like a journey. It's about people, like seeing people go from like nothing to something, or seeing some kind of progress, or an ascent or something.
Yeah.
It's drama, isn't it?
It's drama. And I think artists are resistant to that. So, you know, even artists that trying to put a bio together and, you know, trying to get an angle, and, you know, but it should just be about the music. And I say to the artist, but your narrative, your story is going to lead people to your music, or it's going to enhance your music, because people are going to connect with you. And, you know, it's amazing how resistant artists are to that. It should just be about the music. No, it's about you. You wrote the music. It's actually about you.
So when the contestants come in, are they kind of helped with that kind of story, or are they just rejected if they haven't got a story? Is that?
They wouldn't be rejected. But, you know, the story can be, it can just be that they've got a great personality. You know, it could be like, you know, oh, that girl that walked in the door and just, you know, made us all laugh for 15 minutes. You know, it could be anything. You know, it could even be that they're really shy and quiet. It could be like, you know, the one that's got a great voice, but, you know, doesn't look like she's going to have a great voice because she's really shy and quiet. You know, it doesn't really have to be a thing. It just it's almost like an identity. As something that you can identify that person as being different from the next person.
We get to see, obviously, in The Voice. I mean, I don't watch it so much now, but the first few series I was really hooked on it. And so you get people who they say, oh, I've never done any gigs, or, you know, I've done a couple of gigs here and there, and then they come out in their first performance that they're on TV and they kill it in an audition, which would be like, even an experienced performer would probably struggle in those situations. So how many takes do they get on that? Do they all just get one go?
They get one go, but they are very well prepped. So it looks like we open that door and we shove them on, and we don't. They rehearse. They rehearse on the stage. They rehearse with the band. They know what they're doing. We can never guarantee, if somebody has only sung in the bedroom, that they're going to nail it. And I would always expect maybe a slight drop in that situation, because it's sensory overload. I mean, the set's massive, the sound, you know, if you've never done that before, it's pretty full on. It's pretty overwhelming. I mean, we haven't had audiences for the last couple of years, because that's made it feel slightly different. But, you know, there's just a lot of lights and a lot of sound, and, you know, cameras, and so it is quite overwhelming. But sometimes when they haven't done it before, they don't have anything to compare it with. So sometimes they're just like, I'm just here for the ride. I'm just here for a good time. And then they don't put this pressure on themselves. So there's almost no pattern to how people behave, and each contestant is different. So, you know, you're just monitoring the whole way along what makes them achieve their best. You know, what triggers this person to be confident? What can I do to fuel them, to make sure, because that's ultimately our job, is to make everybody that we work with as good as they can be in that moment, in that situation. the kids are slightly different in a way, because I think lots of those have not done that situation. Never quite, when they're really nurtured, they're really looked after, they're with the parents all the time, they're really cared for, but you're never quite sure if they're going to perform their best, in the moment, because you're building up for months and months to a minute and a half. It's a lot of build up to that moment.
So they get plenty of rehearsal time and plenty of preparation time. So what about when the contestants are first coming on and they're doing the blind audition? Do they that song that they come in with, is that all theirs, or do they ever get like the producer going, actually no, that song's not working, you try this?
Yeah, they sometimes it's theirs. Sometimes they'll come into an audition before the blind audition and they'll just sing a song that is like, that's perfect for them. We have an issue with licensing, so some songs can't be licensed for whatever reason. So sometimes they can't sing their first choice of song because we're not allowed. Sometimes they're not suitable, especially with the kids, because they need to be, everything across the board needs to be suitable, like, the video, the content, the words, the meaning, everything needs to be reasonably Saturday night friendly. So there's lots of complications of songs. We might have done it before, so it might have, now we've done 12 years, that might not be a great choice to have done something that the winner sang last year, so it's not always their choice of song, but they do choose songs and they give lists of songs that, and then it's worked out whether they can be licensed or they're appropriate and all things like that. So they do have control over that.
So would that be, if they do change the song, would that be your choice? Would you be suggesting other things, or is that come from the producers? Or
more sort of, I'd suggest something if I thought I had an idea that was really right for that person. Musical director might think of something, the music team, we got music consultants and a whole music department, they might come up with a suggestion. The singer might come up with a list of 10 and one of those is more suitable. So a team effort, really.
Mm-hmm. So do you ever get like contestants who just come on and they choke and they just can't do it?
Very rarely. Sometimes I think that they would choke in our eyes because we know how well they could have done it, but only we know that. The audience don't know that, or the viewers. So I can't. And now you've said it, it must have happened, but I can't think of one example. I can think of one that I know didn't do as well as they should have done, but that's prior knowledge of what they should have done. Ultimately, we're looking for a new artist. And sometimes I think the general public don't vote for the one that has all the components of being a new artist. And that is partly down to demographic, because I think that's partly down to people like my mother watching the programme and going, oh, that's a lovely big voice and all that, and not thinking about the one that's really commercially moldable or viable or brings something different to the table. So I think that's a disparity between what's commercially viable and the demographic that are watching the TV programme. So, and I think that's one of the problems with the criticism the show gets, that we haven't had a number one single. It's tricky for television and creators, producers.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point you made earlier about kids, the voice kids you were talking about, and you think that it's all going to be generic, but they're actually listening to really kind of diverse stuff and older stuff that you don't expect them to. And that's exactly the same with my 14-year-old daughter. We went on a little road trip recently. She's got her earphones on, and I'm asking her what she's listening to, and she's going, Led Zeppelin and Queen and what? The last
it's
time
amazing.
I heard you were listening to One Direction and stuff like that.
It's so amazing. They don't conform either. They've got their own minds to go in. They're so refreshing. And there is so many times I have the argument when people say, oh, all the music today's, rubbish. It's not like it used to be. And the kids don't know what, I'm like, the kids are listening. The kids are all into Kate Bush at the moment. Like the kids are being educated. They're educating themselves into this amazing, I know Spotify is criticized, but they can go into this world of music. That fans also like bit where, you can stick Kate Bush in and then you can go fans and go into this, world of interesting music. They have it all at their fingertips. I'm jealous of that as, our tape deck, press go, record the charts on a Sunday night, try and miss the adverts. It's such a different world. But it's exciting, I think, musically. We're going to reap the reward of that because, they're going to be the creators that are coming up with this mashup of all these great artists.
We can get the wrong view, or the public view, as you said, the Saturday tea time general populace view is very different to what's actually really happening.
Yeah,
that's very clear in the disparity between, as you said, streaming and the charts. For want of a better word. I hadn't really thought about that. Actually, you've made me think. But there's got to be another sort of spin-off show around that. Kids singing, the Jesus and Mary chain or something. Pure sort of indie stuff. Right?
They're just. I'm so fueled by them. In fact, the teams that I work with pretty much got me through lockdown because I was working with one lad that the parents wanted their time filled. I was in crisis because of all my live work had stopped and and my husband works in hospitality, so we were completely in crisis. And these mums would be like, I know he normally has a lesson once a month, but can we do online? So there was one lad that I was teaching songwriting lesson a week and a vocal technique lesson a week, and he was also coming to a group class that I did online as well. So just so inspiring. In songwriting lesson, we'd analyze things, we'd pick different songs, we'd break them down, work out the chord structures and things. The information that he would give to me about these songs and how his perception of so interesting and so inspiring. And then he'd have his technical lesson, and then he'd come to group class and sing something amazing because he's processing it the whole time. So the teenagers are just so inspiring and so refreshing, and they get such a bad rap in general life, the youth of today and blah, blah, blah. And, you get to know them. They're amazing. I fly the flag for the teenagers.
That's right. Good to hear. So we talked about you coaching contestants and coaching clients. So do you coach the contestants prior? So let's say season of The Voice is done. Some of the contestants, do they carry on working with you, or do you work with contestants to get them into The Voice as well? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So we can't work with anybody on the show that we know. So I have sent some people that I work with to audition, but I can't work with them on the show because it's not fair. And sometimes I have worked with people after the show. Yeah, definitely. As they, a vocal coach thing is like, it's a funny relationship. If you click, and it's our job to understand them and find ways in to get the best out of them. But if you click with somebody, they, sometimes I think it's a bad thing, and sometimes I'll say to somebody, you need to actually go and see somebody else, just for a few lessons and get someone else's perspective, because they're becoming slightly like you're their lifeline. And I think that that's not always healthy, because you've got to be able to fly to that country and do that gig over there if I'm not going to be there. Like, it can't be so dependent. So I think sometimes it's good for them to see other people. But if you do click with a vocal coach, then they understand. I've got singers that I understand their voices inside out. So if they message me from, middle of a European tour or something and say, I'm struggling, I know what their weaknesses sound like. I know what their strengths are, so there is something good about that understanding and long-term relationship.
So who are your mentors and coaches?
I was thinking about this when you asked this question. I think I have different mentors for different things. I have a music consultant who is my mentor for like music business stuff, and he runs the School of Music Business. And I met him because I went to do a how to run a record label course, and so he's like my music business guru. So he's who I would ask on anything kind of, music business related. And then academically, I've had two very strong mentors from doing my master's degree, who were very, very good at leading me through that process. But I think in general life, we're all self-employed. So we're not in, even if we're doing a contract like The Voice, it's still a freelance contract. So we don't have that structure that you'd have through work where somebody would be assigned your mentor and they'd look after you. So I think we all look after each other. So yesterday I was on a coaching call with another vocal coach who's a very good friend of mine, who was just like, I'm a bit stuck in a few ways. Can we brainstorm? So then we had a conversation yesterday, and I work with some really inspiring vocal coaches, really inspiring people in and all of a very positive mindset. We're all in this new wave. I think we've left the 1950s, training behind. So, I work with Juliet Russell, who's incredible. Josh Alamu is incredible. I work with him on Starstruck at the moment. And so I feel like we all sort of, John O'McNeil, I work on with Voice Kids, very good friend. We're all really good friends, but I'd almost say they're my mentors. We sort of mentor each other. I've got another vocal coach friend who's probably my sort of life business mentor, and we check in every couple of days with each other. Is everything on track? What are your aims? What are your goals? So I don't think we're assigned mentors or go and seek mentors, but we just happen to sort of mentor each other, that's maybe because we all understand each other and all understand the sort of freelance thing of it.
So who would you like to work with? Whether that's like if you could write a song with somebody, or if you could be in a band or coach them, or in any capacity, who would you like?
I think I am working with who I want to work with. I think I want to work with the youth. I want to work with teenagers who are creative and inspired and passionate, and I want to develop that journey. And I feel I'm doing that. So that's who I want to work with, the people who are not there yet, who you may look at in 10 years time and go, oh my God, that artist is incredible. And I'd be like, well, that's who I wanted to work with. And that's why they're incredible, because they've had that consistency and that development. So I think if you'd asked me that question 6 years ago, I would have said, this artist or that artist, or, I want to coach Adele through her voice issues, or, that I've got, I know vocal coaches that teach people like Sam Smith, that would have been my answer. It's like profile of who you teach by profile. But actually, I think that's not as interesting as planting that little seed of that plant that's going to then be as big as this one. I think that's what fuels me. And actually, I think that's come from doing The Voice Kids. The Voice Kids, I think, for me was I won't say life changing, but it was career changing, I think, because I think it completely changed my sort of realization of what could be achieved. You know, I think we lived in boundaries of what could be achieved. You know, maybe that's what I was trying to say earlier about the people opening the doors. We lived in boundaries. There was limitations to even what notes you could sing. You know, until Mariah Carey came on and did whistle notes, we didn't know that we could sing whistle notes. You know, there was always limitations. In the West End, you were a belter or you were a soprano. You know, those boundaries are not there now. You can play both. You know, so I think the teens brought, with the Voice Kids, I've just realised that the trajectory that they could go on was limitless. You know, if they apply themselves in the right way and they're inspired and motivated, they can, you know, I've got a student that I set tasks with on TikTok and, you know, whatever, do this, do that. And they do it, and they do it amazingly. And they do the whole production on their Logic. You know, they put all the voices in, they play all the instruments. Like, they're just limitless. So I think that's my answer to that.
You believe the children of the future?
I do, in the words of Whitney. Oh my God. I do love her.
For vocalists who want to, I won't say make it, but who want to progress, who want to maybe make a living out of singing, or want to be a pop star, or want to go to teaching, or whatever it is, but be in the music business. So what would your advice be for them?
So I think knowing their own voice and knowing what they want it to sound like and allowing them to be that voice. I don't think I knew exactly what I was when I was singing. I think when somebody knows what they are and they have that so comfortable with their own voice and their own sound, then you're brought in because they're believable, they're true, they're authentic, and that's attractive in a singer, in a performance way and in a sound way, I think, because they just have that belief in what they're doing. I think they need to write lots of songs, because I think you could like one song in every 10 you write. So if you write 100 songs, you've got 10. You know, I think it's a skill you get better at. So I think writing lots of songs, and I think they have to accept the technology. And that's another thing, like I said about the story, that artists are resistant to. They don't want to accept that, you know, there are stats that people are looking at, and you know, there's an element of social media, and they have to wear a lot of hats, and that's partly why I set up this membership to, you know, help them with those sorts of different hats, because they're doing their own PR, they're doing their own, you know, they're organizing it, they're promoting it, they're plugging it, they're representing it on social media. And that takes a lot of confidence, because they are basically selling themselves and their own product and saying, you know, you need to listen to this because it's great. And that's really hard to do. So I think the more savvy they can be with social media and all of those things, the easier it is for them. So I would say don't resist it, but embrace it. You know, it's if you flip side it, it's a free stage. You could do a gig, you could do a live gig if you wanted every night on social media, and the more your followers grow, the more people you're reaching. You know, if we go and do a gig, and I would never want to replace the gigs, but if we do a gig, you know, you might play to 30 people in a room. So I think I'd say absolutely know your voice. Be really, really authentic to your sound. Write lots and lots of songs. Work with lots of people as well, because producers are going to bring you different vibes. And there's so much to be learned from other people. And get savvy with tech, which people will hate me for.
but it is the way forward. We can't resist it any longer.
No, we can't. And I think if you just flip mindset, you know, I wrote a blog recently about how is your social media mindset, because I think there is a negativity from artists towards it and a reluctance to do it, but they need to document what they're doing, because they're doing it anyway, and that's what needs to be going out. You know, they don't need to be then having, I'm doing a creative day where I'm like gonna, you know, plan my, you know, I think they just need to document as they're going and be consistent. It's hard. It's really hard. I do sympathize, because it's a lot of work, but it's possible DIY, which it wasn't possible back in my day. So, you know, when I said there's pros and cons there, you know, we needed somebody to open the door. You now don't, but you need to put energy into that. It's no good having a product if nobody knows it's there.
Yeah, I think it's the music business after all, isn't it? The music's part of it, and the business is also part of it. It's equal parts, and marketing, of course, being a big part of that. Just before we hear more about where we can find you and your coaching practice, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about, you were talking about performance, because that's an interest of mine, about, you can sing a song, anyone can stand up and sing a song, but what are the key things to performing a song? What is the difference between, this is what I like to sort of differentiate between a gig and a show. Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between getting up and singing a song and performing a song? And what were the sort of the key points of like performance versus just singing?
Yeah, I think emotional connection, connection in general, actually, to the lyrics, to the song, to the vibe, so that it's truthful, so it's delivered. You know those singers where they give you goosebumps. You know, that's a connection. They're connecting with the song, maybe the contour of the melody, the way it sounds in their voice. They're connecting with that, but they're connecting with the story, the emotional intention behind those lyrics. They're potentially connecting to the audience. They're connecting to you. You know, that's special when that happens, and I don't think they can do that without connection. So I think that element of it is a mental connection. You know, how do you get connection? I think you get it. I mean, I would get people to analyze lyrics, put them in a context that they understand if they haven't written them. So if it's cover, you know, what does this song mean to you? What can you visualize when you're singing this song? It might not be what the writer intended, but it's your version of events that you can connect with. Being so connected that they can stay connected when there's other things going on. So when they're in an environment or on a stage they've not been on before or something, or somebody's heckling, or, you know, whatever, that they can stay in the moment of that connection. I think I did my dissertation in my master's on how do producers capture the best, you know, the potential out of a voice in a recording. And I thought it was going to go down to microphones and resonances and, you know, fidelity and blah, blah, all of those things. And the whole dissertation came out at the end as emotion. You know, what makes what is a capturing potential in a voice? What is that potential? And it all came back as emotion, something that makes us feel something. And that can be imperfect. It doesn't have to be slick, technically. It just needs to be connected and real. So I think that's really important. And then I think that follows back way back in my dance background, that follows back for me into physicality. So and I talk about physical identity, and if you were in a silhouette, so if you watch somebody on stage in a silhouette, you know, you would know Freddie Mercury is Freddie Mercury. you'd probably know Robbie Williams by, in his less distinctive clothes wise and stuff, but you'd probably know him from the way he walks across the stage. You'd know Amy Winehouse from a silhouette. You'd know James Brown from a silhouette, the way he walks, the way he dances, the energy. So that as well, I think, is really important to have. You're connecting with the song, but you're physically connected, because, we don't just speak. I'm using my hands now as I'm speaking to you. We don't just use our faces. Our whole body is involved. So having that truthful storytelling connection with the whole of yourself, holistic performance, I think, is a believable one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's hard to do, though, because it's you've got to be totally uninhibited and free and comfortable and confident. All of those things, when singers have got imposter in their minds, and all of those things, to overcome that and be physically, holistically free and authentic is not easy.
And I guess it's probably easier to do in a 1.5 minute audition, to stay in emotion and to connect in that way, than it is to do like a 3-hour show and be emotionally connected to every song. But it does make the difference, and like you say, maybe that is. I know you're not on the X Factor, but I guess that word, that phrase, the X Factor, is probably that, isn't it? It's that something you can't quite quantify what it is, but when your hair's standing up, and when it makes you feel. And after all, that's how music, particularly on Spotify, is curated. It's not necessarily by alphabet. It's by, this makes you feel it's a mood, it's a feeling. So, and that's why we listen to music, to change our feelings. If we want to feel upbeat and we want to dance, or we want to feel melancholy, we want to feel sad, we want to feel amused, or whatever it is, or sexy or sensual, whatever it is, we want to feel these things, and we go to different styles for each mood. But I remember playing this song, and I remember really sort of meaning every word and really connecting to it as an experiment, almost, like to say, okay, this audience, they're not really there, but let's see what happens. And a few of them woke up, and one of them started weeping, and this really incredible reaction coming back, just because I'd felt it myself, that I'm really into this song, I'm really meaning it, and they seemed to sense it as well. And then other songs where I wasn't doing it, there was no reaction. And so it really is, that is the thing, isn't it? If you can get that right, then that is obviously, if you really can't sing and it's dissonant, then it's not going to work as well. But if you can hit the notes and do that, then I guess that's why great artists are great artists, because they can do that.
I think your point there as well is really interesting, of doing a long set, and that you can't feel emotionally connected with all of them. And I think that's right, you can't. And so there's also that kind of acting, so that you're not totally giving. Adele can't feel absolutely heartbroken every time she sings Someone Like You, but we believe that she is. So there's that element of, there's been enough connection with it in enough times, and knowing how to get that connection across, maybe with a bit of preservation on yourself. So that's slightly contradicting what I said, but that's, if you're going to do a world tour and you're going to sing the same songs every night, you're probably not going to totally feel them all. You'd be an emotional wreck.
Exactly. And I guess that's what I'm, bringing it back home to the performance element of something. So you can have a raw energy, connected to a song, and so you're emotionally involved in it without even performing it. And then there's the little things of, singing and, shutting your eyes and doing little things that make you look as though you're in it, but maybe you are in it, but not as totally as the song, as you're supposed to be in the song, but you can still convey, as you said, a good enough look to go, they're feeling that moment, and they're making that appropriate gesture at that moment in the song.
I think video is a good is a good teller for that as well. Because there's a balance, I think, of performance level. I was doing some backing vocals for a prog rock band, and probably 2004 or something. And we were filming this thing for a video, and me and the other backing vocalist watched it back, and we were like, we look ridiculous. We look totally ridiculous because we were so into it. We were so going for it. We thought it felt great because we were like, letting loose. We were letting loose, but it looked ridiculous. It looked too much. And we then reverted back to classic, backing vocals, straight face, little bit of a bop, and we went moody because our full performance felt great to us but didn't look right. So video can tell you that. So videoing yourself and watching it back, you can learn so much from that.
Yes, yeah. And I heard something very similar to what you were saying just about that, about videos and that very same kind of story somebody was doing. And like people have got like when they're playing the instrument, they got out doing this, gurning and doing this kind of thing. But being a video, as you said, it just looks wrong because the video is probably telling a different story as well. You're telling the story in a video, which is a different narrative to what the song is.
Yeah.
It's.
I mean, I think people should record their rehearsals and video their rehearsals and analyze, because there's so much to be learned from your own self-analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, with theatre, obviously theatre's more about projection and making things bigger, whereas video's making things just maybe with the eyes and
much smaller. Micro goes back to that micro managing, like we micromanage the vocal, the sound into the gear changes and things, micromanaging performance as well.
Great. Well, we've heard a lot about you and what you do. So how can we get in touch with you? Where can we find you?
So I have most of my social medias are just under J Ramage, which is JAI RAMAGE. My website is jramagevoice.com. And from there, you can pretty much get to all my avenues. My membership is called Entourage Membership. And I have a teens group and an adults group for that. So that's really for people that are aiming to self-release music and, doing the DIY approach and normally haven't got managers. And then I kind of act as that sort of developing them in that group situation. EntourageMembership.com and my website, jramagevoice.com.
Well, Jay, thanks for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've certainly learned a lot. And like I say, it's something I could just talk about this all day. So
could I. We'd be here forever. Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.